Hello, English readers and English learners and book lovers. Welcome to episode 25 of the podcast Reading English. I'm Lydie Bureau and I'm an English teacher in France. I'm also the founder of Lydie's Book Club, in which I host live readings of adaptations and original versions of classics and contemporary novels, mainly written by women because women are amazing. Once a week, I meet the members of the book club in a live workshop via Zoom to discuss the chapters of the book that we are currently reading, in addition to series of live Instagram live sessions that I host um, of each chapters of the book. And in October 2024, we are embarking on a new literary journey, and I'm very excited about this one. This month, we are going to read the C1 Advanced Penguin Readers adaptation of North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, or some other pronounced Gaskell. But I think I'm going to go for Gaskell or Gaskell, a mix of both. Anyway, so this is the Penguin Readers, the 2008 Penguin Readers edition. So this is quite an old one. Um, there aren't any new version of it, so I hope at some point they will re-edit it. But it's still a very good um, adaptation and still worth reading anyway. And this is the original book here. I've made my notes, as you can see. Loads, plenty of notes. And um, so this is the one that we are going to, this book that we're going to read. So this book is another classic of English literature, and it was first published in serial form between 1854 and 1855, and eventually as a standalone book, like this one, in 1855. So first she published parts or chapters of it in a journal, and eventually she released all the stories got published in one book when she and finished publishing all the chapters. So this is what a lot of writers used to do in at this time in the 19th century. So this beautiful novel depicts the rich complexity of social class conflicts and love. And I hope you will love it as much as I do. I've been a fan of this beautiful story. I discovered the novel through the BBC adaptation, the BBC series adaptation. And well, I found that actors were brilliant. And actually, you know what? This year it's going to be the 20th anniversary of the broadcasting of the BBC mini series adaptation. And actually, the museum, Elizabeth's house, I'm going to talk about the museum, Elizabeth Gaskell's house museum, is actually hosting different live events. And there is an actual event online around the anniversary of the BBC series. While I was doing the research on for this podcast on Elizabeth Gaskell, I found this website and discovered all the events that they had online, and it was amazing. So they're very active, and they're doing all sorts of events. And there is this one, so you can just book online a ticket and attend the live session. And if you're not available at this time, you can still the live will be recorded, so you get the link of the recording, so you can still have access to the content and discussion. Right. So that being said, now I'm going to tell you more about Elizabeth Gaskell. So Elizabeth Cleghorn Stevenson, which was her maiden name, because Gaskell is her the her name, her husband's name. So she was born in 1810 in London. Her mother comes from a well-connected middle-class family, but she died when Elizabeth was a baby. Her father was a clergyman and a writer called William Stevenson. He remarried, and Elizabeth was sent to Knutsford, a small town in the south of Manchester, to live with her aunt, where she had a very happy upbringing. But it seems like at this time, well, fathers would not raise their daughters on their own, or it seems like the stepmother did not want to have her stepdaughter living in the same roof, perhaps. So up she was sent in the north, to the north, sorry, to her aunt's to her aunt's house, to be looked after. But she had a very happy upbringing, and Elizabeth's family was very much influenced by the Unitarian movement, which is a form of Christianity that was more tolerant, and they emphasized more on the importance of improving social conditions of the poor, which was a concept that was very unusual at the time and very modern as well. So being part of this community was very influential in forming Elizabeth's character and beliefs, and also forged her and led her to talk about these social issues in her books, and in this one in particular. In 1832, she married William Gaskell, a Unitarian clergyman, also writer and lecturer. So you see that she even married someone that was Unitarian as well. The couple settled in Manchester, where they had 4 children. They both worked a lot for the sick and poor. She had a very busy social life. Her friends included intellectuals, politicians, and renowned writers, such as a certain Charles Dickens and Charlotte Bronte. Elizabeth Gaskell started writing short stories quite early in her writing career, and it's after the death of her son that she wrote her first novel, Mary Barton, published in 1848. She was 38 at the time. So you see, it's never too late to start, whether it's 38 or 40 or 50. And the writing of this book was a way for her to take her mind off her grief. And the novel was a real success and was very much admired by Charles Dickens. And this recognition from the public and the literary world led her to publish her second novel, Cranford, in Dickens's magazine, The Household Words, which was a weekly journal. And she published this, similarly to North and South, she published the chapters gradually in this journal between 1851 and 53. So I guess it was a way for writers and also publishers to see if the story attracted people, or were to test a little bit as well the public and see how they reacted to the stories of um, those writers. In 1853, she also published um, Ruth, her third novel, and soon after North and South in 1855 as a book form. But she started publishing um, North and South in a serial form. I think in she started in 1853, 54. So rather quite at the same time. So you can see that she's really um, published a lot. She was very prolific at this time. In 1850, she became a good friend of Charlotte Bronte, that I mentioned earlier, which is the author, the amazing author of Jane Eyre, which is our May live read along. Last May, we read this book, which is an E A2 plus, which is upper beginner level in English. So you have lots of illustrations. It's quite easy. If you have an intermediate level in English, it's perfect for you. And that is the original text. So you can see here, this is a beautiful edition of Penguin Readers Classics. And there was quite a lot to adapt here. So unfortunately, her dear friend, so Charlotte Bronte, died a couple of years later in 1855. So only 5 years later, after they met, probably. And to honor her, Gaskell published a biography of her dear friend called The Life of Charlotte Bronte. So it was published in 1857, 2 years later. The book was received with great interest at the time and played an important part in building Bronte's reputation, and since it is regarded as a valuable source of information about Charlotte Bronte, especially a biography that dates from the 19th century. It's contemporary to the author. So it's just amazing to have this biography on Charlotte Bronte. Finally, her last writing work was the novel Wives and Daughters, published posthumously in 1866. So, posthumously means that the book was published after her death. She died in 1865. So, you can see that the book was published afterwards. And I think the novel wasn't quite finished as well. Until the end of the 20th century, she was still mainly known as Mrs. Gaskell, which reflected her reputation as a writer of gentle, uneventful, and easy to read novels due to the success of Cranford, which was also adapted on the BBC. Wives and Daughters also has been adapted and the BBC as a BBC miniseries. Haven't watched them yet, but this is on my to-do list. So this novel, Cranford, is her most popular novel during her lifetime, and this is the story of ladies in based in Knutsford, so the town where she grew up. And this book is a delightful, amusing picture of a small town life, which is very different from her industrial, and I quote, industrial fictions, criticizing the condition of the poor and the working class, such as North and South. Actually, the book was violently attacked by critics and newspapers at the time. And on the other hand, it was also very much admired. So you can see a real division. Elizabeth Gaskell was a lively and very charming woman with a huge interest in people, and we can feel that in her book. She had many friends in London, Europe, and the United States. She was very involved in the political, religious, and scientific issues of her time. And she died of a heart attack on the 12th of November in 65, sorry, at her residence on the 84 Plymouth Grove in Manchester, which is now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this podcast, this episode, that it is now known as the museum, the is now a museum, sorry, the Elizabeth Gaskell's house. And it is a popular landmark for book lovers. If you're visiting Manchester, you can find the link in the description of the museum website. This museum, as I mentioned before, is very active. They organize all sorts of events online and on site, including this event on the celebration of the 20th anniversary of the release, well, the broadcasting of, yeah, and production of North and South by the BBC. So go and check out their website. They have all sorts of interest. If you want to, if you're studying English literature, or if you're just interested in this author, or you want to maybe visit Manchester, this is a great museum to visit. And actually, I am wondering, you guys, if you would be interested in going to Manchester as a literary retreat. Let me know in the comments. I would love to know if you would be interested in going there and discover this place, and at the same time Manchester, and maybe other places that Elizabeth Gaskell has visited as or lived. I don't know. It's while I was doing this research on this book and Elizabeth Gaskell, I found this website, and I was amazed by all the different events that they host. And I was thinking that perhaps it would be a great place to visit. And let me know if that's something that you would love to do. And I will keep that in mind. And perhaps someday it's on my to-do list to be able to organize a literary retreat, perhaps in Manchester or elsewhere. Who knows? But let me know in the comments if that's something that you would love to do, so I can kind of gauge whether there'll be people up for it. Right. Hi, Katie. Hello, hello. Thank you for joining this live. I hope you're well. So now let's talk more about North and South, and let's not get derailed by other amazing topics about Elizabeth Gaskell. So the story was initially published in serial form in Dickens's weekly journal Household Words from 1854 to 1855. So over a year, she published this novel in different parts, and eventually as a standalone book in 1855. So I don't know if you imagine, but she had 4 children. And she was also writing books at the same time. So it's amazing to it yeah, I can't believe how she managed to be able to write so much. We can see that in the space of 10 years, she wrote so many books during that period. So it's amazing. And I've recently discovered while I was researching again that Charles Dickens was actually um, quite annoyed by the fact that she wasn't delivering her writings on time. Um, and he was, yeah, that's something that he was quite upset about, the fact that she didn't respect the deadlines. And when you look back, you you would say that it's it's really a reflection of the patriarchal society and being very demanding, while um, I would have liked to see how Dickens would have managed if he were a woman and had four kids to look after, because I don't think her husband was the stay-at-home dad. So to have a little bit of compassion and be more understanding would have been a good thing. But uh, when you look back, you realize how women at the time, uh, especially women having kids, to be able to write books at the same time is kind of a performance, quite a an amazing uh, I don't have the word, sorry, but an amazing something that, yeah, she managed to do is quite incredible, and at her credit, really. So, at the heart of the novel, let's discover more about this novel. So, at the heart of this novel lies John Thornton and Margaret Hale, who embody respectively the difference between the north of England, where industries are changing the landscape of the cities and countryside, and the south, which remains mostly agricultural and where the upper class lived lazy, unproductive lives. Margaret and her family are representatives of the Southern upper classes and upper middle classes, I would say. And when they moved to the industrial north, they found it very difficult to adapt, which results in tragic consequences for Mr. and Mrs. Hale. But I don't say more. Don't want to spoil too much. Well, much of her childhood, Margaret lived in London with her aunt's family and her cousin Edith, which are the perfect examples of the lazy rich. The aunt's family is the upper class representation of English society. Other important characters in the novel include Mrs. Thornton, mother of the mill owner John Thornton, and she dislikes Margaret immediately. Then we have Nicholas Higgins, a mill worker with a sick daughter, Bessie, and he will play a major role in the story. And finally, we have Frederick, Margaret's brother, and Mr. Bell, which is Mr. Hell's old friend from Oxford. And they both play small but significant parts in the novel. In North and South, the conditions of the cotton industry workers and their relationship with with their employers are important subject of the book. Milton Northern, where the story takes place, is in fact the city of Manchester. It's a made up town, okay? So it doesn't exist in real life, uh, but it's actually Manchester, which was at the center of the Industrial Revolution in the late 18th century, transforming Britain into a country where goods were mass produced in factories. The most important industry at the time were cotton and wool. As a result, the population of these northern towns of England, where these industries were based grew rapidly, and the working conditions were terrible. In North and South, Gaskell uses the Higgins family to show the problems faced by the factory workers, or the hands, as they are called by factory owners, like Mr. Thornton used that term in the novel, which really shows that workers were considered as commodities rather than human beings, having families and mouths to feed, which is illustrated by the Boucher family. In the novel, workers are fighting for better wages and to be considered as equal with their employers who look down on them. On the other hand, we have Mr. Hale, Margaret's father, a clergyman who has lost his faith in the Church of England. So we assume that we can imagine that he has turned towards the Unitarian beliefs and feels forced to leave Helston, a town from the south, to find Helston is also a made-up town, I think. I'm not entirely sure, but I'm perhaps. So this town is located in the south, and he has to find work as a tutor in the north. And this is an example, as I mentioned, of the strong influence of Unitarianism. Margaret, our main character, is a very kind and loving person. She visits the poor and sick, but her upbringing has also taught her to despise commerce, as they use the term, or trade people, which to some extent explains why she dislikes Mr. Thornton at the beginning. Part of Margaret's journey in the novel is to learn to respect people who are involved in trade and to become less proud. That is why this novel, this one, is described as a Bildungsroman, which is a literary term, Bildungsroman, it's a German term, which is a literary term to talk about a novel showing the evolution of its female hero. Similarly, Thornton begins to realize that workers have human feelings too. He and Higgins will eventually become friendly and start talking freely to each other. These changes in Margaret and John Thornton reflect what Gaskell wanted to see in society. The Northern mill owners treating the workers better, and the South learning to respect the part that industry played in making the country rich. The South people had this sort of very presumptuous attitude towards northern people and tradesmen. This novel is rich and complex. I find beautiful the way the love story and the class conflict are interconnected. It was at her time, the novel was defined as a topical work. So North and South was quickly dropped from public attention. And by the 1920s, Gaskell was mainly known as the author of Cranford, published in 1853, as I mentioned earlier. She was only rediscovered in the 1950s by Marxist and socialist critics. Unfortunately, she did not appeal to the feminists of the 1970s because of her domestic image as a wife and mother and her non-combative position on the rights of women. Unfortunately, she was not considered, so Elizabeth Gaskell was not really considered as feminist. However, that's my opinion. I believe that Gaskell has, in fact, a very feminist view on women in this novel, in particular, in North and South, through the strong-headed and opinionated character of Margaret, which is this character played this is the actress in the BBC miniseries. She's very opinionated, and actually, at some point in the novel, there is a passage where she's in a room with other women. I think she's with Fanny, with John Thornton's sister, Fanny, and she's in the room with her and other women, other wives, and she is bored. She's bored about the conversation, the topics of their conversation, and it's very clear to me in the novel that she enjoys much more the conversation she has with men in the room than with the other women. So that shows as well that Margaret doesn't want to be considered as just a decorative thing that we put there in a room. She has a mind of her own, and she has ideas, and she's an independent woman. And so for me, this view is definitely feminist. And she brilliantly shows that as well. When she shows that as long as women are educated to be decorative and dependent, like Edith or Fanny. So Edith was is Margaret's cousin, and Fanny is John Thornton's sister. They illustrate this point. They play this role. Oh, well, they illustrate those women who are simply there to get married to get married with a rich husband, to find a rich husband and a rich man and get married. So in the end, as long as we educate women in that sense, this is what Gaskell here is criticizing, is that as long as we educate them to be women to be decorative and dependent, like they would do at the time, like Edith or Fanny, their supposed influence is a myth. And this idea that public and private life should be conceived as separate spheres shows little hope for solving social issues, because as it shows in her novel, public and private life are intricately connected. And we really see the powerful influence that Margaret is going to have unintentionally, or some or unconsciously, I would say, but she will have a massive impact on John Thornton's view on the workers, and her friendship with what's his name? Higgins. I forgot his first name. Let me find it. Nicholas Higgins. Her friendship with him is going to turn around John Thornton's view and influence him in a way. So that's amazing, because I share this view as well. Your work life is very much connected to your personal with your personality and the way also you approach your personal life. It's very much similar in their own sphere, but and very much connected as well. We know that definitely that our professional life affects our personal life and vice versa. At first, the novel was described as incoherent, but and by the critics at the time, but that's because Gaskell was writing a new kind of literary genre that did not exist yet. By crafting a novel around social issues, class division, and love, she was leading the path of a new literary genre that will make its mark in English literature forever and still to this day. And I'm glad we are revisiting this amazing novel at Lydia's Book Club and that I'm able to learn more about her work through this research and to make this podcast and to be able and to be in the position to share it with you who are maybe just discovering um, her personal life and work and her books as well. I've heard many praises on wives and daughters, and I can't wait to read this book as well. Unfortunately, I checked and they don't do adaptations. They haven't, there isn't any adaptations of Wives and Daughters. Probably wasn't that enough popular. So hopefully I'll find a way. So I hope you enjoyed this episode and that it helped you to get an overall understanding of the novel and its author. If you like this content, make sure you like this podcast on YouTube here, or if you're listening this on Spotify, please leave a comment or follow the podcast, subscribe to this YouTube channel, do everything. And I would love to read your comments. Let me know what you think about this episode, and also whether you would be interested in joining a literary retreat in Manchester at some point. And also make sure that you also don't forget to join the book club as well. And before I leave you, I just want to let you know that from next week, we will start reading this adaptation, the C1 Advanced Adaptation of North and South by Penguin Readers. You can find this book online on Amazon, or there are loads of websites now that can sell this book. It's the 2008 edition, and we will start the first live reading session on Wednesday, 9th of October at 2 p.m. Central European time or Paris time, if it's easier for you. And as usual, in addition to this series of live readings, I will host not 3, but 4 live workshops over Zoom. This month, we're hosting 4 live work. I will be hosting 4 live workshops over the Zoom. So if you want to be part of these live workshop discussions, make sure you subscribe to the book club membership. And this way you have the chance to improve your speaking skills, meet fellow book lovers, discuss female authors, and develop your critical thinking skills and learn more about literature and about North and South. So the link is in the description. I wish you, hi, Kitty, that was super interesting. Thank you very much. I'm so glad you liked it. I wish you a beautiful end of the day, and I will see you next month. Next month, I will host a new podcast episode dedicated to a classic of American literature. And it is called The Age of Innocence. This is the adaptation that we will read next month. It is the A2 plus, the upper beginner level. So this is the adaptation, and that's the book, The Age of Innocence, from Edit by Edith Wharton. Maybe you know it. Um, or if for the others, it's going to be a discovery. We will discuss this fantastic book published in 1920 and its brilliant author, Edith Wharton, who in this novel revisits the old New York of her childhood at its golden age, but with a modern look. So it's going to be, again, a very, how to say, an amazing literary journey again. But that's for next month. So in the meantime, I say bye. Bye bye.